The transport shuttle's engines screamed in protest as it descended through Kethera's crimson atmosphere, buffeted by winds that could probably qualify as weapons of mass destruction on more civilized worlds. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his restraint harness and tried to convince himself that the violent shaking was just turbulence, not the ship disintegrating around him in creatively painful ways. "Welcome to sunny Kethera," he muttered, watching through the viewport as the desert planet's surface rushed up to meet them with the enthusiasm of a charging rhinoceros. "Where the weather tries to kill you and the locals consider that a warm greeting." The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom with the strained cheerfulness of someone who had clearly drawn the short straw for this particular assignment. "Approaching the Zephyrian Coliseum, Captain. Local time is high noon, surface temperature is 47 degrees Celsius, and I'm told the entertainment value is off the charts." "Entertainment value," Jake repeated, checking his gear for what felt like the 100th time. His diplomatic satchel contained enough cultural briefings to fill a small library, but somehow none of them had adequately prepared him for the reality of volunteering for alien trial by combat as a gesture of interspecies goodwill. The Colosseum rose from the desert like a massive stone flower, its architecture defying both gravity and common sense with spires that twisted toward the binary suns in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Landing platforms jutted from the structure at seemingly random intervals, connected by bridges that appeared to have been designed by engineers who considered safety railings a sign of weakness. As the shuttle touched down with a thud that suggested the landing gear had probably seen better millennia, Jake caught his first glimpse of the Zephyrian delegation waiting to escort him to what his briefings euphemistically called the ceremonial demonstration of martial prowess. They stood in perfect formation at the edge of the landing platform, their elongated ears tracking the shuttle's approach with the precision of organic radar arrays. Even at this distance, Jake could see they weren't entirely human. The ears gave it away, gracefully pointed and constantly mobile, expressing emotions in ways that human ears simply couldn't manage. The figure at the center of the group commanded attention like a gravitational anomaly. Warlord Sarah Nix wore armor that seemed to shift between metallic and organic, adapting to her movements with fluid precision. Her distinctive ears remained perfectly still as she watched his approach, a sign that Jake's briefings had warned him indicated either supreme confidence or carefully controlled hostility. He gathered his equipment, double-checked his translator unit, and stepped off the shuttle into air that tasted of ozone and barely contained violence. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making each step feel more significant, and the twin suns overhead painted everything in shades of amber and copper that no human artist had ever imagined. Warlord Sarah Nix approached with the measured stride of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through the strategic application of superior firepower. Her violet eyes assessed Jake with the thoroughness of a weapons targeting system, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of authority that made small planets reconsider their foreign policy. "Captain Morrison, I presume. I am Warlord Sarah Nix of the Ketheran Dominion, victor of the Crystalline Wars, breaker of the Siege of Talmoran, and," she paused, her ears shifting almost imperceptibly, "skeptical about your species' claims regarding combat effectiveness." Jake managed what he hoped was a confident smile while internally noting that her introduction sounded like a resume written by someone who collected military victories as a hobby. "Warlord Sarah Nix, it's an honor to meet you. I hope I can provide an adequate demonstration of human capabilities." "Adequate," she repeated, her tone suggesting she found the concept about as likely as finding ice cream vendors in black holes. "Your species has many curious qualities, Captain, but martial prowess has never been prominently featured in our intelligence reports." "Well," Jake replied, shouldering his gear pack, "maybe it's time to update those reports." Sarah Nix's ears twitched once, a movement so brief Jake almost missed it, before she gestured toward the Colosseum's entrance. "Indeed. Shall we proceed to the trial by collar? I confess myself curious to see how humans face death with honor." The walk through the Colosseum's corridors provided Jake with his first real exposure to Zephyrian architecture up close. The walls seemed to pulse with their own internal light, covered in patterns that shifted and changed as they passed. Sarah Nix moved through the space with absolute familiarity, her boots ringing against surfaces that looked like crystallized starlight. The trial by collar is our most sacred test of worthiness, she explained as they navigated passages that seemed designed by someone who believed straight lines were for quitters. Warriors face the sand lions in single combat, armed only with traditional weapons and whatever courage they possess. Sand lions, Jake repeated, filing away the information that he was about to fight creatures with names that sounded like they belonged in a particularly violent nature documentary. The transport shuttle's engines screamed in protest as it descended through Cathera's crimson atmosphere, buffeted by winds that could probably qualify as weapons of mass destruction on more civilized worlds. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his restraint harness and tried to convince himself that the violent shaking was just turbulence, not the ship disintegrating around him in creatively painful ways. "Welcome to sunny Cathera," he muttered, watching through the viewport as the desert planet's surface rushed up to meet them with the enthusiasm of a charging rhinoceros. "Where the weather tries to kill you and the locals consider that a warm greeting." The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom with the strained cheerfulness of someone who had clearly drawn the short straw for this particular assignment. "Approaching the Zephyrian Coliseum, Captain. Local time is high noon, surface temperature is 47 degrees Celsius, and I'm told the entertainment value is off the charts." "Entertainment value," Jake repeated, checking his gear for what felt like the 100th time. His diplomatic satchel contained enough cultural briefings to fill a small library, but somehow none of them had adequately prepared him for the reality of volunteering for alien trial by combat as a gesture of interspecies goodwill. The Colosseum rose from the desert like a massive stone flower, its architecture defying both gravity and common sense with spires that twisted toward the binary suns in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Landing platforms jutted from the structure at seemingly random intervals, connected by bridges that appeared to have been designed by engineers who considered safety railings a sign of weakness. As the shuttle touched down with a thud that suggested the landing gear had probably seen better millennia, Jake caught his first glimpse of the Zephyrian delegation waiting to escort him to what his briefings euphemistically called the ceremonial demonstration of martial prowess. They stood in perfect formation at the edge of the landing platform, their elongated ears tracking the shuttle's approach with the precision of organic radar arrays. Even at this distance, Jake could see they weren't entirely human. The ears gave it away, gracefully pointed and constantly mobile, expressing emotions in ways that human ears simply couldn't manage. The figure at the center of the group commanded attention like a gravitational anomaly. Warlord Sarah Nix wore armor that seemed to shift between metallic and organic, adapting to her movements with fluid precision. Her distinctive ears remained perfectly still as she watched his approach, a sign that Jake's briefings had warned him indicated either supreme confidence or carefully controlled hostility. He gathered his equipment, double-checked his translator unit, and stepped off the shuttle into air that tasted of ozone and barely contained violence. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth standard, making each step feel more significant, and the twin suns overhead painted everything in shades of amber and copper that no human artist had ever imagined. Warlord Sarah Nix approached with the measured stride of someone who had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved through the strategic application of superior firepower. Her violet eyes assessed Jake with the thoroughness of a weapons targeting system, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of authority that made small planets reconsider their foreign policy. "Captain Morrison, I presume." "I am Warlord Sarah Nix of the Catheran Dominion, victor of the Crystalline Wars, breaker of the Siege of Talmoran, and," she paused, her ears shifting almost imperceptibly, "skeptical about your species' claims regarding combat effectiveness." Jake managed what he hoped was a confident smile while internally noting that her introduction sounded like a resume written by someone who collected military victories as a hobby. "Warlord Sarah Nix, it's an honor to meet you. I hope I can provide an adequate demonstration of human capabilities." "Adequate," she repeated, her tone suggesting she found the concept about as likely as finding ice cream vendors in black holes. "Your species has many curious qualities, Captain, but martial prowess has never been prominently featured in our intelligence reports." "Well," Jake replied, shouldering his gear pack, "maybe it's time to update those reports." Sarah Nix's ears twitched once, a movement so brief Jake almost missed it. Before she gestured toward the Colosseum's entrance. "Indeed. Shall we proceed to the trial by collar?" I confess myself curious to see how humans face death with honor. The walk through the Colosseum's corridors provided Jake with his first real exposure to Zephyrian architecture up close. The walls seemed to pulse with their own internal light, covered in patterns that shifted and changed as they passed. Serenix moved through the space with absolute familiarity, her boots ringing against surfaces that looked like crystallized starlight. The trial by collar is our most sacred test of worthiness, she explained as they navigated passages that seemed designed by someone who believed straight lines were for quitters. Warriors faced the sand lions in single combat, armed only with traditional weapons and whatever courage they possess. Sand lions, Jake repeated, filing away the information that he was about to fight creatures with names that sounded like they belonged in a particularly violent nature documentary. Genetically enhanced predators, bred specifically for arena combat. 6 legs, crystalline claws, intelligence that borders on tactical awareness, and a natural hostility toward anything that moves. Serenix's voice carried the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, if the weather involved being torn apart by angry wildlife. Sounds like a Tuesday back home, Jake said, trying to inject some levity into what was rapidly becoming a very serious conversation about his immediate survival prospects. For just a moment, something that might have been amusement flickered across Serenix's features. Then her diplomatic composure reasserted itself, leaving Jake wondering if he'd imagined the whole thing. They emerged into the arena proper, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The preparation chamber beneath the arena felt like the waiting room for the universe's most exclusive and deadly club. Jake sat on a bench that had probably been carved from a single piece of crystallized volcanic rock, adjusting the straps on armor that the Zephyrians had provided with the kind of casual generosity that suggested they expected it to be returned in several small, easily identifiable pieces. Traditional Zephyrian combat gear, the armorer had explained with the enthusiasm of someone discussing particularly effective funeral arrangements. Lightweight, flexible, and designed to provide maximum mobility during your final moments. Jake tested the weight of the plasma spear, a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy and looked like it had been designed by engineers who believed that function should always be accompanied by an impressive light show. The energy shield strapped to his left arm flickered occasionally, cycling through power levels with the reliability of a piece of equipment that had probably seen better centuries. The arena's sound system continued its enthusiastic tribute to Galactic smooth jazz, the musical selections apparently chosen by an AI with questionable taste and unlimited access to the universe's most inoffensive elevator music. Jake found himself unconsciously tapping his foot to a particularly catchy fusion number while trying to mentally prepare for combat against creatures that had been specifically bred to make short work of overconfident warriors. "Captain Morrison," a voice called from the chamber's entrance. Jake looked up to see one of Serenix's subordinates, a warrior whose ears were positioned in what Jake was learning to recognize as professional sympathy. "The warlord requests a final briefing before the trial commences." Jake followed the warrior through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, the living light responding to their footsteps with ripples of color that looked like captured starlight. They emerged onto a viewing platform that overlooked the arena, where Serenix stood with the rigid posture of someone who had never encountered a situation that couldn't be improved through superior tactical positioning. "Captain," she said without turning around, her attention focused on the arena floor below, "I feel obligated to inform you that the Sand Lions have been, particularly aggressive today." Jake joined her at the platform's edge, looking down at the blood-stained sand where 3 massive shapes prowled with the fluid grace of apex predators who had never needed to worry about anything higher on the food chain. The Sand Lions were exactly as advertised. 6-legged killing machines with crystalline claws that caught the light and threw it back in rainbow patterns that would have been beautiful if they weren't attached to creatures designed for dismembering overconfident diplomats. "Aggressive how?" Jake asked, noting the way the creatures moved with intelligence that bordered on tactical awareness. "They have rejected their usual feeding schedule and appear to be anticipating something." Serenix's ears shifted into a position Jake hadn't seen before, suggesting either concern or possibly mild indigestion. "Our beast masters believe they sense something unusual about today's trial." "Unusual meaning?" "You, Captain." "They have never faced a human before, and their enhanced senses are detecting biological markers they cannot categorize. Jake watched as one of the sand lions paused in its prowling to stare directly up at the viewing platform, its multiple eyes focusing on him with the intensity of a targeting computer acquiring a lock. The creature's intelligence was unmistakable. This wasn't just a beast following instincts, but a predator making tactical assessments. "Well," Jake said, trying to inject some confidence into his voice, "at least they're curious. That's something to work with." Serenix turned to face him fully, her violet eyes studying his expression with the thoroughness of someone trying to determine whether he was brave, insane, or simply too stupid to understand the situation. "Captain, in 3,000 years of trials, no warrior has ever expressed optimism about facing enhanced sand lions." "Maybe that's the problem," Jake replied. "Everyone goes in expecting to fight them. What if I try something different?" Before Serenix could respond to this potentially suicidal display of creative thinking, the arena's ancient announcement system crackled to life with the enthusiasm of technology that had been waiting centuries for its moment to shine. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of various biological configurations," the system announced in tones that suggested it had been programmed by someone who believed death matches should be hosted with the same enthusiasm as game shows. "Welcome to today's trial by collar. Please take your seats and prepare for an exhibition of martial prowess that will either demonstrate the worthiness of our challenger or provide educational entertainment regarding the consequences of overconfidence." Jake stared at the arena speakers, wondering if every piece of Zephyrian technology had been designed by engineers with a deeply questionable sense of humor. The sound systems were upgraded during the renovation of the Fifth Dynasty, Serenix explained with the weary tone of someone who had personally witnessed too many technological improvements. The engineers believed that theatrical presentation would enhance the cultural significance of the trials. "Right," Jake said, watching as spectators began filling the arena's tiered seating with the enthusiasm of beings attending either a sporting event or a public execution, depending on how things went. Nothing says ancient sacred trial quite like professional wrestling commentary. The music shifted to what sounded like a particularly upbeat death march as Jake made his way to the arena floor. The sand felt different under his feet than he had expected. Not the loose desert sand of Earth, but something that had been treated with minerals that made it grip his boots and respond to movement in ways that suggested the arena floor was as much a part of the trial as the creatures he was about to face. "Challenger Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation," the announcer continued with unwavering enthusiasm, "armed with traditional Zephyrian weapons and whatever courage his species can muster, will now face 3 enhanced sand lions in single combat. Wagering is now closed, and we remind all spectators that flash photography is prohibited during active dismemberment sequences." Jake hefted his plasma spear and activated his energy shield, which immediately began flickering with the kind of reliability that suggested it had been designed by optimists who believed that equipment failures built character. The sand lions had arranged themselves in a semicircle around him, their movements coordinated with the precision of a military unit that had been specifically trained in the tactical dismantling of overconfident bipeds. "Beginning trial sequence in 3, 2, 1. The announcer declared. "Let the demonstration of worthiness commence." The first sand lion launched itself forward with the explosive power of a guided missile, its crystalline claws extended and its multiple eyes locked onto Jake with the focus of a being that had never needed to worry about missing its target. Jake dove sideways, feeling the rush of displaced air as 600 pounds of enhanced predator passed through the space where he had been standing. His energy shield chose that exact moment to emit a cheerful electronic beep and shut down completely. Technical difficulties detected, the arena's maintenance system announced with the same enthusiasm it might use to announce lunch specials. "Please stand by while customer service addresses your equipment malfunction. Your trial experience is important to us." Jake rolled to his feet, plasma spear in hand, staring at the defunct shield while 3 genetically enhanced killing machines circled him with the patience of professionals who knew that panic was just another tool in their tactical arsenal. "Customer service," he called out to the arena's speakers while dodging another attack that left claw marks in the crystallized sand. "Really? I'm fighting for my life here, and you're offering customer service?" "We apologize for any inconvenience," the maintenance system replied cheerfully. "A technical representative will be with you shortly. In the meantime, please continue with your trial and remember that your feedback helps us improve our services." The absurdity of receiving technical support announcements while engaged in Mortal Kombat struck Jake as so fundamentally ridiculous that he found himself laughing even as he parried a claw strike with his plasma spear. The weapon's energy field crackled against crystalline talons, throwing sparks that illuminated the arena in patterns of blue and gold. "You know what?" Jake called out to the Sandlions, who had paused in their attack to observe his apparently suicidal display of humor. "This is exactly like tech support back home. Completely useless when you actually need help." From her viewing platform, Serenix watched with growing fascination as the human warrior continued his running commentary on customer service inadequacies while simultaneously engaging 3 apex predators in single combat. His movements were unlike anything she had observed in centuries of trials. Not the formal, ritualized techniques of Zephyrian martial arts, but something adaptive and improvised that seemed to treat the entire situation as a problem to be solved rather than a sacred test to be endured. When Jake managed to use the arena's own architectural features against his opponents, driving one Sandlion into a force field generator and temporarily stunning it, Serenix's ears perked forward with interest she hadn't felt since her own first trial decades ago. "Unconventional tactics," one of her advisors observed, his tone suggesting disapproval mixed with grudging respect. "Indeed," Serenix replied, never taking her eyes off the human warrior who was currently lecturing a 6-legged predator about the importance of patience in customer service interactions. "Most unconventional." In the arena below, Jake had apparently decided that if he was going to die, he might as well make it entertaining. He dodged another attack while calling out helpful suggestions to the arena's maintenance system about improving their response times, turned a defensive maneuver into an offensive strike that actually landed, and somehow managed to look like he was enjoying himself despite being outnumbered by creatures that could probably be classified as biological weapons. "Your technical representative appears to be running late," Jake announced to the arena's speakers while using his plasma spear to pole vault over a Sandlion that had tried to flank him. "I don't suppose you could expedite that service call? Things are getting a bit urgent down here." Serenix found herself leaning forward, her usual composure forgotten as she watched the human demonstrate something she had never seen in the arena before, the ability to find humor in the face of death, not as denial or hysteria, but as genuine courage that refused to be diminished by circumstances. For the first time in years, she began to wonder if the intelligence reports about human capabilities might have been significantly incomplete. Jake had just managed to back one of the Sandlions into a corner using a combination of plasma spear work and what he privately thought of as aggressive customer service complaints, when the arena decided to escalate the situation in ways that probably violated several interstellar treaties regarding fair combat practices. Warning lights began flashing around the arena's perimeter, cycling through colors that hurt to look at directly. The ancient stone floor started humming with barely contained energy, and Jake could feel his hair beginning to stand on end in ways that suggested the local electromagnetic field was about to become extremely personal. "Attention trial participants," the arena's AI announced with the same cheerful enthusiasm it had maintained throughout Jake's increasingly surreal combat experience. "Unexpected system activation detected. We are now implementing enhanced trial protocols for your entertainment and educational benefit." "Enhanced protocols?" Jake shouted while diving behind a chunk of decorative stonework as energy barriers began materializing randomly throughout the arena. Nobody mentioned enhanced protocols in the briefing. "We apologize for any confusion," the AI replied with the mechanical sincerity of a customer service representative who had been programmed to remain upbeat while delivering terrible news. "Enhanced protocols are automatically triggered when trial participants demonstrate exceptional adaptability. Congratulations on your qualification for our premium experience." From her viewing platform, Serenix felt something cold settle in her stomach as she recognized the warning signs of a trial that had spiraled beyond its intended parameters. The enhanced protocols were a relic from the arena's earliest days, designed to test warriors whose skills exceeded normal expectations. In 3,000 years, they had been activated exactly 7 times, and the survival rate was not encouraging for anyone hoping to maintain a diplomatic career. Warlord, one of her advisors said urgently, perhaps we should intervene. The enhanced protocols are not part of the agreed-upon demonstration. Serenix watched as Jake dodged an energy barrier that appeared directly in front of him, rolled under a gravity well that tried to compress him into a more convenient size, and somehow managed to maintain his running commentary on the arena's increasingly homicidal customer service policies. No, she said quietly, her ears positioning themselves in a way that indicated she had just made a decision that would probably have significant consequences. Let the trial continue. I want to see what he does. In the arena below, Jake was discovering that enhanced protocols apparently meant that the ancient architects had designed their trial system with a complete disregard for concepts like fair play and reasonable survival odds. Energy barriers flickered in and out of existence around him, gravity wells opened at random intervals, and the sand lions had apparently decided that the new environmental hazards were just additional tactical opportunities to be exploited. Outstanding performance so far, the arena's AI continued its enthusiastic play-by-play commentary. Participant Morrison is demonstrating remarkable adaptability in the face of escalating challenges. Current survival probability is estimated at 12% and falling. 12%. Jake called out while using his plasma spear to deflect a gravity well that was trying to relocate his internal organs. That's optimistic. I would have guessed closer to 3%. The largest of the sand lions, apparently the tactical leader of the group, had positioned itself to take advantage of the shifting energy barriers. It stalked Jake with the patience of a predator that understood siege warfare, waiting for the moment when the environmental hazards would force him into a position where escape would be impossible. Jake could see the trap developing, could feel the walls of possibility closing around him as the arena's systems created an increasingly complex maze of deadly obstacles. Any normal response would involve finding cover, waiting for the hazards to cycle through their patterns, and hoping that superior positioning would provide a tactical advantage. Instead, Jake did something that 3,000 years of arena trials had apparently never prepared the systems to handle: he stopped running. The sand lions paused in their coordinated attack, their enhanced intelligence trying to process this unexpected change in behavior. The arena's energy barriers continued their random manifestations, but Jake stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, his plasma spear held loosely at his side. System query, he called out to the arena's speakers, his voice carrying clearly through the Colosseum's enhanced acoustics. Are enhanced protocols designed to test combat effectiveness, or adaptive problem-solving? Enhanced protocols evaluate comprehensive warrior capability, the AI responded, apparently programmed to answer direct questions even when they came from participants who were supposed to be too busy dying to engage in philosophical discussions. Assessment includes tactical awareness, physical prowess, and cognitive flexibility under extreme stress. Cognitive flexibility, Jake repeated, watching as one of the sand lions crept closer, its crystalline claws extended for a killing strike. Interesting. What happens if a participant chooses non-engagement as a tactical option? The AI paused for several seconds, its processors apparently working through scenarios that hadn't been considered during the original programming phase. Non-engagement protocols are undefined, it finally admitted. Please continue with standard combat procedures while we research appropriate responses. Jake grinned, recognizing the sound of a system that had just encountered an edge case its designers hadn't anticipated. The sand lions continued their approach, but something in their movement patterns had changed. They were still predators, still dangerous, but they were also curious about this strange behavior from their prey. The largest sand lion stopped just outside striking distance, its multiple eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that suggested it was trying to solve a puzzle. Up close, Jake could see the intelligence in those alien features. Not just instinct and aggression, but actual thought processes working through a situation that didn't match any of its previous experience. You know, Jake said conversationally, addressing the creature directly, I bet nobody's ever just talked to you before, have they? It's all been combat and survival and proving worthiness through violence. The sand lion tilted its head in a gesture that was almost human-like, its ears, smaller versions of the distinctive Zephyrian features, swiveling forward with apparent interest. From the viewing platform, Sarah Nix found herself holding her breath as she watched the human warrior attempt something that challenged every assumption about the nature of the trial. Her own ears had moved into a position of intense focus, tracking every nuance of the unprecedented interaction taking place below. "What is he doing?" one of her advisors whispered, his voice barely audible over the arena's continuing musical soundtrack. "Something new," Sarah Nix replied, and for the first time in decades, she felt genuinely uncertain about what would happen next. In the arena, Jake had apparently decided that if he was going to die anyway, he might as well try something that had never been attempted in 3,000 years of trials. He set his plasma spear down on the sand and extended his empty hands toward the sand lions in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peaceful intent. "Look," he said, addressing all three creatures while energy barriers flickered around them like a disco light show designed by hostile aliens. "I know you were created to test warriors, but maybe we could try a different approach. What if instead of fighting, we work together to solve whatever puzzle this arena is trying to present?" The sand lions exchanged glances with each other, a behavior that Jake was pretty sure wasn't mentioned in any of the briefing materials about genetically enhanced predators. The largest one took a step closer, close enough that Jake could see his reflection in its crystalline claws, close enough that one swipe would end the trial permanently. Instead, the creature sat down on its haunches and made a sound that was somewhere between a purr and a question. "Well," Jake said, feeling a grin spread across his face despite the continuing mortal peril, "that's a start." Above them, the arena's AI struggled to process this unprecedented development while the enhanced protocols continued their cycle of environmental hazards around a group of beings who were apparently ignoring them in favor of cross-species communication. "System error," the AI announced with somewhat less enthusiasm than usual. "Participant behavior does not match any programmed scenarios. Please stand by while we improvise." And for the first time in 3,000 years, the ancient arena found itself learning something new about the nature of courage, intelligence, and the unexpected possibilities that emerged when someone chose cooperation over conquest. Sarah Nix watched from above, her violet eyes wide with fascination as she witnessed something she had never seen before, a trial that was transforming from a test of worthiness into a demonstration of wisdom that challenged the very foundations of what she thought she knew about strength and honor. The arena's enhanced protocols had apparently exhausted their repertoire of creative ways to kill trial participants and settled into what Jake could only describe as confused mechanical grumbling. Energy barriers flickered half-heartedly, gravity wells opened and closed with the enthusiasm of someone going through the motions, and the background music had shifted to what sounded like jazz fusion interpretations of ancient Zephyrian meditation chants. Jake sat cross-legged on the blood-stained sand, surrounded by three genetically enhanced predators who had apparently decided that conversation was more interesting than dismemberment. The largest sand lion, who Jake had mentally nicknamed Alpha for lack of a better term, had progressed from cautious curiosity to what could only be described as engaged participation in their unlikely diplomatic summit. "So the arena has been testing warriors for 3,000 years, Jake said, scratching Alpha behind what he hoped were ears rather than some form of sensory organ that would interpret touch as a declaration of war. "But has anyone ever asked what you three think about the whole setup?" Alpha made a series of sounds that ranged from harmonic purrs to complex vocalizations that Jake's translator unit was attempting to process with limited success. The device finally settled on providing subtitles that read, "Existential questioning about purpose and fulfillment in life, possible commentary on the nature of artificial selection, untranslatable concepts regarding pack dynamics." "Existential questioning," Jake repeated, grinning despite the surreal nature of having a philosophical discussion with a creature designed to tear him into constituent elements. "Yeah, I can relate to that." From her viewing platform, Sarah Nix found herself in the unprecedented position of watching a trial that had completely abandoned any pretense of following established protocols. Her advisors stood around her in various states of confusion, their ears positioned in configurations that suggested they were trying to process events that didn't match any training they had received. "Warlord," Captain Zektar said carefully, "should we intervene?" The trial has clearly moved beyond its intended parameters. Serenix never took her eyes off the arena floor, where the human warrior was apparently conducting some form of group therapy session with apex predators while the arena's AI provided increasingly bewildered commentary. "No," she said quietly. "I want to see where this leads." "But the sacred protocols." "The sacred protocols," Serenix interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that made her subordinates take involuntary steps backward, were designed to test the worthiness of warriors. Captain Morrison is demonstrating worthiness in ways that our ancestors never imagined. In the arena below, Jake's unconventional approach to trial by combat had progressed to what could only be described as collaborative problem-solving. The sand lions had arranged themselves in a circle around him, their attention focused on the energy barriers and gravity wells that continued to manifest around them with mechanical persistence. "Attention trial participants," the arena's AI announced with noticeably less enthusiasm than usual. "Enhanced protocols require, continued engagement with hostile elements. Please resume combat operations at your earliest convenience." "What if we tried working with the hostile elements instead of against them?" Jake called back, gesturing toward an energy barrier that had just materialized nearby. "These barriers aren't random, they're following some kind of pattern." Alpha tilted its head, studying the barrier with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. After a moment, it moved toward the energy field and touched it gently with one crystalline claw. The barrier flickered, changed color, and shifted position. "Interesting," Jake said, watching as the other sand lions began examining the various energy manifestations with scientific curiosity rather than predatory instinct. "The barriers respond to contact. They're not weapons, they're interface elements." The arena's AI processed this observation with what sounded like digital confusion. "Interface elements are not, that is not, please stand by while we consult the original programming documentation." "You know what I think?" Jake continued, standing up and dusting sand off his armor while maintaining careful eye contact with his unlikely allies. "I think this whole trial was never really about fighting. It was about figuring out how to work together to solve problems that none of us could handle alone." As if responding to his words, the arena floor began to change. The blood-stained sand shifted and rearranged itself, revealing patterns of crystalline conduits that pulsed with the same light as the energy barriers. The entire Colosseum hummed with increasing intensity, and Jake could feel something fundamental shifting in the ancient systems that governed the trial. "Warning," the AI announced, its voice now carrying notes of what could only be described as excitement. "Unknown configuration detected. Original programming parameters are evolving." That was when the alpha sand lion appeared. It emerged from a section of the arena floor that Jake would have sworn was solid stone moments before, rising like a mechanical nightmare given biological form. Where the other sand lions were the size of large earth cats, the alpha was easily twice Jake's height and covered in crystalline formations that looked like they had been grown rather than evolved. Its eyes, all 6 of them, tracked movement with the precision of targeting computers, and when it opened its mouth, Jake could see rows of teeth that looked like they had been carved from the same crystalline material as its claws. "Ah," Jake said, taking an involuntary step backward while the other sand lions positioned themselves between him and this new threat. "I'm guessing this wasn't part of the original trial either." "The alpha represents the final test," the arena's AI explained, its enthusiasm returning as it processed this familiar scenario. "Combat engagement is mandatory. Enhanced protocols require demonstration of ultimate worthiness through individual combat with the apex predator." The alpha sand lion moved with fluid grace despite its size, circling Jake and his allies with the patient confidence of something that had never encountered a problem it couldn't solve through superior application of violence. But Jake noticed something in its movement patterns, a hesitation, a curious quality that suggested intelligence beyond mere predatory instinct. "Ultimate worthiness," Jake repeated, his mind racing through possibilities as he watched the massive creatures approach. What if ultimate worthiness isn't about defeating the alpha, but about understanding what it represents? Before anyone could respond to this potentially suicidal display of philosophical speculation, Jake did something that 3,000 years of trials had never prepared the arena to handle. He walked directly toward the alpha sand lion, his hands empty and his posture open. The creature stopped its circling, its 6 eyes focusing on him with laser intensity. Jake could feel the weight of attention from the viewing platforms above, could sense Serenix and her warriors watching as he approached a creature that could probably use him as a toothpick without significant effort. "You're not just a predator, are you?" Jake said quietly, stopping just outside the alpha's reach. "You're the guardian of something. The keeper of the real test." The alpha tilted its massive head, studying Jake with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had been bothering them for several millennia. When it spoke, its voice was like distant thunder filtered through crystalline formations, carrying harmonics that Jake felt more than heard. Finally, the alpha said, its words translated by Jake's unit with perfect clarity, "Someone asks the right question." The arena fell completely silent. Even the background music stopped, leaving only the hum of ancient systems and the sound of Jake's heart beating faster than a hyperspace engine. The trial was never about combat, the alpha continued, settling onto its haunches with surprising grace for something the size of a small building. It was about recognition. About seeing beyond the surface to understand the true nature of strength. Jake felt a grin spreading across his face as understanding dawned. The sand lions, the energy barriers, the enhanced protocols, they were all tests of adaptation, cooperation, and creative problem-solving. Not combat trials, but intelligence tests. For 3,000 years, the alpha said with what might have been satisfaction, warriors have approached this arena expecting to prove their worth through violence. You are the first to seek understanding instead of victory. From her viewing platform, Serenix felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the trial, of worthiness, and of the human warrior who had just redefined 3 millennia of sacred tradition through the simple act of asking questions instead of making assumptions. Without conscious thought, she found herself moving toward the arena floor, her advisors calling out in alarm as she abandoned her elevated position. The stairs seemed to blur past her as she descended, driven by an impulse she couldn't name but couldn't ignore. She entered the arena through the warrior's gate, her boots ringing against the crystalline patterns now visible in the sand. Jake turned toward her approach, his expression shifting from confusion to something that might have been hope. "Warlord," he said, clearly uncertain about the protocol for addressing alien royalty who interrupted sacred trials. Serenix walked past him toward the alpha sand lion, her movements deliberate and formal. When she reached the massive creature, she performed a gesture Jake had never seen before, a complex movement that involved kneeling, extending her hands, and positioning her distinctive ears in a way that conveyed respect mixed with supplication. "Guardian of the ancient wisdom," she said, her voice carrying across the arena with perfect clarity, "I request permission to speak." The alpha regarded her with the kind of attention usually reserved for cosmic events. "Speak, daughter of Kethera. This human warrior has demonstrated worthiness beyond the traditional measures," Serenix said, her words echoing through the Colosseum. "He has shown wisdom where others showed only strength, cooperation where others sought dominance, and understanding where others demanded victory." She stood, turning to face Jake directly, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of formal declaration. "Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation," she announced, "your courage has earned you more than survival. It has earned you recognition as a warrior of the highest order, worthy of the greatest honor our people can bestow." Jake stared at her, aware that something significant was happening but uncertain about the implications of formal recognition in a culture where worthiness was apparently measured by the ability to hold philosophical discussions with genetically enhanced predators. "What kind of honor?" he asked, suspecting that the answer was going to change his life in ways that his diplomatic training hadn't covered. Serenix's ears positioned themselves in a configuration that Jake had never seen before, conveying emotions for which his translator unit provided no adequate substitution. When she spoke, her voice carried both formality and something intensely personal. "The honor of partnership," she said. "The honor of joining your strength to mine, your wisdom to our people's future." The honor of standing as my equal in all things, if you will accept the responsibilities that come with such a bond. The arena systems hummed around them, processing implications and calculating outcomes while Jake slowly understood that he had just received what amounted to a marriage proposal delivered through the medium of interspecies trial by combat. Just to be clear, he said, looking around at the assembled sand lions, the watching crowds, and the ancient technology that had apparently been waiting 3,000 years for someone to ask the right questions, you're proposing to me? Here. Now. In front of genetically enhanced predators and a cosmic audience. Serenix's expression transformed with something that could only be described as joy mixed with anticipation. I am proposing a partnership that will unite our peoples through bonds stronger than treaties or trade agreements. I am proposing that we build something new together, based on the understanding that true strength comes from cooperation rather than conquest. Jake looked at the woman who had just redefined his understanding of courage, honor, and the possibilities that emerged when people chose to see beyond their differences. Around them, the arena hummed with anticipation, ancient systems waiting for an answer that would determine the future of relations between two species. Warlord Serenix, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the enhanced acoustics, I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather build that future than right here, with you. The alpha sandlion made a sound that Jake's translator identified as approval mixed with cosmic satisfaction and mild amusement at the theatrical nature of human courtship rituals. And in the ancient arena where warriors had tested their worthiness for 3 millennia, 2 representatives of different species began planning a partnership that would transform the meaning of strength, honor, and the courage to choose understanding over fear.